Well, welcome everyone. I'm excited to be here today for our free webinar session presented by InsightWorks and sponsored by Sabre Limited. I'm also very excited to introduce today's topic, which is Advanced Finite Capacity Scheduling in Dynamics 365 Business Central. I'll take a moment to introduce myself. I'm Donna Simonovic, the Marketing Manager here at Sabre Limited, and our expert presenter today is Mark Hamblin, President of InsightWorks. Sabre Limited is located in Cambridge, Ontario, and is an expert in Microsoft Dynamics Business Central ERP implementation and training for the manufacturing industry. InsightWorks is a leader in operational productivity improvement through the efficient implementation of add-ons for Business Central for manufacturing, warehousing, and distribution companies. We estimate that today's webinar will take up to about 45 minutes of your time. All our webinars are recorded and loaded onto YouTube, so be sure to go to our Sabre Limited YouTube channel and check out more videos and subscribe to our channel so that you receive the notifications when new content has been added. To ensure the best quality, everyone will be in listen-only mode, but if you do have questions or comments, go ahead and submit those by clicking on the chat icon and then typing your question in the pop-up chat pane, and we'll answer your questions at the end of the session. So now I'd like to hand it over to Mark from InsightWorks to begin our webinar. Go ahead, Mark.
Excellent. Thank you, Donna. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. We're going to jump in and get going here. So as Donna went through, this is Mark Hamlin here, and I'm going to go through and run you through the presentation. We're just going to do a very brief introduction, then we'll jump right into the demo and talk a little bit about how you can potentially buy the thing. And then we'll do the sort of interactive Q&A at the end. If you do have any questions as we go through, as Donna mentioned, just enter those as well so that we can review them before we get into the chat. Now, a little bit about us. Donna covered that off pretty well, but we are based in Canada here. I'm actually out in Edmonton. We have people in Ontario as well. But really the key is we work with Sabre to deliver these solutions. Now, the MxAPS product we're looking at today, which is the finite capacity scheduling, depending on the complexity of your environment, almost certainly we'll have one of our specialists engaged, but we really are going to be working with Sabre to get this solution deployed. All right, now with that, today we're focusing on this MxAPS product, which is the finite capacity scheduler, but there are a number of other tools that we provide that sort of go hand in hand with that. Shop floor insight is one of the big ones because when we're doing anything to do with scheduling, we want, sort of timely information from the shop floor. We want to know what you've completed, how much labor you've got into something, those types of things. So a tool to report that information directly from the shop floor can be very handy, and that's what Shop Floor Insight does. And there's a number of other tools that we have available for manufacturing and also for inventory management, distribution, those sorts of things. Actually, let me just back up. These guys at the bottom here, if you're on Business Central Cloud, you can talk to Sabre. They'll help you out. All of these are free applications that you can use, including the graphical scheduler that I'll be showing a little bit in the demo here, if you just want some basic drag and drop type scheduling for your environment. All right, with that, let's talk about MxAPS. That's what we are here for. So APS is Advanced Planning and Scheduling, but really what MxAPS is it's that Advanced Finite Capacity Scheduling. And what we mean by advanced is, it's going to go out and look at, all the constraints and the capacities and everything you have within your facility, what you've modeled within Business Central, and it's going to generate that schedule that you can actually execute on. In other words, we're not going to send out a schedule that says start on this and you don't have, capacity or you don't have materials, those sorts of things. It's going to give you something you can actually work towards. So really the intent of this thing is to turn scheduling into that systemized process, right? Production planners, production schedulers, environments are very special people, right? In a good way, mostly. They're very important. They know their stuff. They're also very hard to find. And if they go on vacation for 2 or 3 weeks, you might be in trouble for that period of time. What we want to do is turn that whole scheduling process, we want to pull all that information out of those people's heads and put it into the system so it's a repeatable thing where you can just hit a button and magically make it work. And as an example, we've got Daimler as a customer, 2 plants, and one in Mexico and one in the US. And one of those plants is $1 billion plant. You don't have to be $1 billion company to use MX, but they do. And nobody's going to schedule that thing manually. They have this thing automatically just generate a schedule a couple times a day, and that's what they work against. And if it wasn't generating a schedule that you could actually execute, that would be useless. So really that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get you away from using those drag and drop scheduler tools, those sorts of things, and have the system generate something you can actually use. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, finite capacity forward scheduling. So really that's basically working in reality. Business Central by default, you'll set a due date for hopefully sometime in the future, and it'll backwards schedule and tell you when you need to start, whether that's in the past or 3 weeks from now or whatever. What we do is we say, okay, here's all of your demand out there, all your sales demand and subcomponent demand and everything else. Starting today, this is what you need to do in order to produce that product, right? So we start from today and move forward in time. We also go out and look at the machine center. So this is a bit of a gap in Business Central where, I can have a work center that's got 10 machines. You have to schedule those machines manually if you want to make use of them, like different capabilities, speeds, things like that. MxAPS will automatically choose the appropriate machine center from within your work center to schedule that product on. So again, maybe I'm an injection molder. I've got 10 machines. Some run at different rates. Some have different changeover times, things like that. It'll automatically choose the appropriate one to use for you. And in special cases, we can then override that and use alternate machine centers. I'll talk about that in the demo a little more. A few of these things. The sequencing is a good one to talk about because we can do color wheels. We'll go light to dark and then back to light to dark, those types of things. Or if you're heat treating and you've got an oven, you want to start low temperature, ramp up to high, and then ramp back down to low. All that type of sequencing we can do as well. The slot splitting, if you're in a high volume environment, maybe you've got an order for 20,000 parts. You may not want to run that all at once because that's going to tie up your equipment for 2 weeks or whatever it happens to be. You may want to split that up into individual lots by a total number of lots or a total quantity per lot, and that'll allow you to schedule that same production order on multiple machines or multiple days or whatever you want to do. So that's another very useful and important one. A few other things, net change rescheduling, like a machine goes down or something like that, you can just run a net change and it'll tell you what you need to move around to account for that change in capacity or labor, or maybe you've got a high priority order you want to slot in there, those types of things. The planned equipment maintenance. So if you do have, preventative maintenance scheduled, so you've got some PM scheduled on the various work centers and things like that, you can put that in and it'll schedule around those naturally, right? You can also use that to do, if you want to get fancy, predictive maintenance planning. So we can tell you, hey, in a month, this machine will have run for 1,000 hours, or will have done 500 impressions or whatever it is. And you can use that information to predictively schedule when you need to do that maintenance, rather than just say every month we do this. Well, maybe that machine barely ran that month. Why would you be doing the PM on it if you didn't use it, right? So there's lots of things you can do there. There's non-production scheduling. That's not really out of the box, but we can do that. We can come in and do things like schedule loading bays or shipping bays or whatever you want, picks, warehouse activities. All of those types of things can be tied into the schedule if you like. By default, what you get today is it'll schedule production orders. But if you want to add in a bunch of other tasks that need to be scheduled that go along with it, you can do that as well. This multi-segment setup reduction is another good one because, in Business Central, you've kind of got setup and run time, and then you've also got move time, wait time, queue time. But the setup and run is really what most people use. But setup is just one block. With MX, we can actually split that setup into multiple segments. So for example, I'll go back to injection molding. You might have a mold changeover and a color changeover. Well, we can set it up so that we can reduce as many of those mold changeovers as possible and just deal with the color changeovers. So we can reduce partial setup times through the schedule. And then finally, this advanced constraints, where I've mentioned before, if you don't have the subcomponents, if you don't have labor available, if you don't have tooling available, we can constrain the schedule based on those constraints. All right, so now availability for this. Today, you can go and install it from AppSource if you're running Business Central Cloud. If you're running Business Central on premises, Sabre will help you get it set up and going. Those advanced constraints that I mentioned, the labor, material, tooling, all of those sorts of things, electricity pricing, whatever constraints you want to use, will be out by the end of this month on AppSource or for Business Central. If you're running the older version of NAV, right, I think everybody here is on Business Central, but if you're running NAV, we do have the on-prem version that we've been selling for decades that you can use, and it has all the constraints and everything that are available today with that. So it's just an app source. It'll be available in September. All right, well, end of this month, so that's 2 weeks. Now, I'm not going to go through this, but we've got tons of experience. So MX, it's new for Business Central and AppSource, but it has been around for decades, and we've got a ton of experience. I mentioned Daimler. I could do a bunch of other name dropping, but a lot of larger companies. And now that we're selling with Business Central, we've got smaller companies using it as well. So we can scale all the way from a very small number of production orders all the way up to thousands of production orders a week. Okay, so I'm just going to skip this. Pretty much any environment that you work in, we can likely deal with. Now, with that, let's jump in and actually see what this thing looks like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start here in Business Central. I'm in our cloud environment here, and we're going to talk a little bit about how we've got this thing set up. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is, what we've got is I've got a bunch of production orders in the system. So these production orders were generated from a forecast. So we have a weekly forecast that says we need all of these things. And so you'll notice that the due dates on these are all very similar because they came in from a forecast. And that's not atypical, right? Like quite often you go into an environment and these due dates aren't really meaningful because somebody's done a bunch of order entry on a Friday afternoon. And guess what the ship date or the due date for that is? It's probably Friday afternoon. So everything is scheduled to be shipped in the past, or maybe they put a 1 week lead time in there. Well, that's not realistic. But we do see that all the time where the due dates aren't really realistic. They don't make sense. So these are all sort of older production orders back in 2020, but we'll use that as an example. So they're all scheduled for that period of time. So that's pretty typical. Now, the other thing I'll mention is what we're actually building. So we're not doing bikes, and I know that probably saddens many people on the call. What we're going to be doing is something a little new. We're going to do some battery boxes. And just to show you what these things look like, let's go in here and we'll actually look at the structure of one of these guys. Hopefully I grabbed the right one here. And this is basically the product that we're building. So we've got a bunch of subcomponents in here. We've got a bunch of labor scheduled and those sorts of things. Now, a couple of the things I wanted to point out here is everything here is scheduled at the work center level. So this is spelled wrong. It's supposed to be a shear, but anyway, this work center, these shears, we have a couple of those, right? On the laser, we have a couple of lasers, but we're scheduling it at the work center level, and we're going to let the system choose the appropriate laser cutter or shear or whatever to schedule that product on. This one underneath here is a little bit of an exception. This happens to be a long bracket. So we have a few different press brakes, and because this is a long one, we explicitly say run it on this 10-foot brake. So we schedule that at the machine center level. I'll show you what we can do with that. And a bunch of other stuff. And this one also, this SS happens to mean it's a stainless steel. We also have an aluminum battery box that we produce. So that kind of gives you a background of what we actually have. We've got a bunch of production orders in the system to build these battery boxes and the subcomponents and everything else. Due dates are kind of meaningless because they came in from a forecast and they're all for the same week. What's that going to look like? Well, if you're not using MxAPS, Business Central is going to schedule that for you, right? Based on the routing you've got set up, Business Central will happily generate a schedule for you. It'll backward schedule based on the due date. So if you want to see what that looks like, you could, again, look at the production order list I just showed you with the due dates, or you can use our graphical scheduler tool. Now, this is that free tool that's available on AppSource. You can just install it, run it, and as soon as you do that, you can open that up to look at all the production orders within Business Central. So it'll take a sec to load the app here for the first time. And what it's got here, by the way, these colors, when you set up the scheduler, you can create whatever views you want. I created a view that's got a bunch of different colors. So the sort of orangish color here means nothing's scheduled. Blue means we've got some good load associated with it. And red means it's overloaded. But this is what Business Central has done for us for scheduling. If we look at this laser, everything is just all on the same day on the laser work center, right? So we've got these machine centers, we've got these two different lasers with different size beds, and we've got everything scheduled at the main work center It hasn't figured out which laser cutter is best or not. And it's also overloaded that work center. So you could not really use this to do scheduling, right? I can't use this to say this is what you need to execute. This might give me a rough order of go from a sequencing perspective, like do this one first and this one and so on and so forth. But this is not a schedule. This does not tell me, do I have enough capacity, what machines are going to be in use, any of that kind of stuff. And by default, this is what Business Central is going to give you. Now, luckily, with the graphical scheduler tool, if you really wanted, I could come in here and I could grab these guys and drag them, drop them, and put them on the right machine and do all of those sorts of things if I really wanted. But if I've got 1,000 production orders in there, I don't want to spend my day dragging and dropping these little boxes all over the place. We don't like that. So we don't want you actually ever having to use a tool like this to do drag and drop scheduling. This is great for a quick review, but that's all it is. It's a reporting tool. Now, again, if you go and install this and you don't need something like MxAPS, this gives you the ability to drag and drop and visualize your schedule and all those sorts of things, and it's just free. But we don't want this. This is useless. We're not going to be able to run our shop based on what Business Central has done for us. So what do we do instead? We go in there and we use this create production schedule thing, and every morning or twice a day or whatever, scheduler would come in here and execute this. You can also set this up to run in a job queue, so it can run overnight or run a few times a day or whatever you want to do. But in my case, I'm going to come in here, and if you recall, everything was back in 2020. So I'm going to just schedule for 8 a.m. starting on April 1st, 2020. That's when I want to run my schedule. So let's pretend that this is tomorrow. So I come in here and I say, starting tomorrow, what's my schedule going to look like? And I want to schedule it out for 30 days. So you have the ability to schedule, a year in advance. But if I just want to see what the next 30 days looks like, I can do 30 days. And then I can also come in here and choose the production orders I want to schedule. So if I just want to schedule firm planned or released or any criteria associated with that production order, you can set whatever filters you like. So by item number or whatever info you want to put in that schedule. At any rate, for me, I'm just going to schedule every production order starting at this date for 30 days. And when I hit generate schedule, that's going to take, for the data I have, a few hundred operations, takes about 10 or 15 seconds. If you have 1,000 production orders out there, that might be a few minutes to actually run the schedule. Most of that is just sending the data back and forth to the scheduling engine, but it doesn't take very long. It's way faster than, running MRP. So what it did there, it ran that schedule and it's done. And these are my schedule results here. Now this page that pops up, the schedule result list, that's an option. I could have had it pop up the chart. I could have had it just commit the schedule and I don't see anything. There's a whole bunch of different options I'll show you. But in this case, it shows me this thing and gives me, some statistics about what I did on that schedule. And you can also see it in the little fact box dealy here. So what this allows me to do is run scenarios, right? Everything is early because I started my schedule on what was it, April 1st, and everything was due sort of mid-April. So everything I'm able to schedule is early. But I've run other schedules where everything was late, right? And that might have been because I had less labor, and maybe I ramped up my labor and now I can make it earlier. Some stuff was early, some stuff was late, and some stuff couldn't even be scheduled within 30 days, right? That's how late it got. So I can use these statistics to drill down and figure out which orders I need to worry about, those types of things. But in this case, it's pretty simple, right? It tells me, yeah, everything is early, everything is good. I could just commit these results, and we update all the production orders in Business Central, and we're good to go. But, maybe I want to just review and make sure everything's okay first. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in here and say graph results, and it's going to show me a Gantt chart basically of those schedule results. So this is, again, the same data as what I showed you the first time where it was really a terrible looking schedule. Now what we've got is an executable schedule that we can actually send to the shop floor. If you look at that laser thing, right, where before it was everything was right on the laser work center, and it didn't actually allocate which orders went to which laser cutter, that's changed. MX has gone and done that. And it said, hey, you need to run this guy on this thing, and you need to run this guy on this thing, and that sort of thing. And you'll notice here that we ran this, and this is a short bracket, right? So this guy got cut. It's a short bracket, and then it sent it off to this 10-foot press break. And that's because it prefers this machine over all the others for speed and all sorts of things. So it's chosen this one. But this guy above it, this long one, this one, if you remember, the long bracket has to go on this 10-foot break here. It can't go on the 6-foot one. It doesn't fit. So what happens? It comes in when it's supposed to throw it on the long press break. It can't schedule it because that press break is busy. So what does it do? If we go in here, it's actually chosen an alternate machine to run this on. So it's found a larger machine that it could still run that operation on, that part on. And that's important because this may have incurred a penalty to actually do that. It might take longer to do a setup. It might be a slower machine, or it might be a subcontractor. So I chose this, that's an internal machine, but it could also intelligently choose when to do subcontracting. You could say, here's all the penalties that I incur if I subcontract this work versus do it internally. And the system might say, you know what, you're so busy, it makes sense from a cost and time perspective to actually subcontract that work instead. And it'll make those decisions intelligently for you. You don't have to do it yourself. Now, again, I can override any of this if I want, but that's what it's done. So it's choosing the best machine to use based on all the other things that are going on within the facility. Now, actually, one thing I didn't mention is, there's a couple of different colors here. This is the same production order. The sort of magenta color here is setup time, so that's our setup segment, and then the green is the runtime. But like I mentioned, I could split up that setup time into multiple segments. I could have 3 different setup segments, and I can use the sequencing and some other tools to eliminate those setup segments by running similar parts together in that schedule. So we've got that setup minimization. And speaking of sequencing, let's go down here. Actually, maybe I got a better one that I can use. It doesn't really matter. They're basically the same. I'll go down here. You'll notice here on the welding, we've got some sequencing going on. So AL is the aluminum box. So you'll notice we scheduled aluminum, and then we go to stainless steel. And then we do stainless steel, stainless steel, stainless steel, and then we'll switch back to aluminum at the end. So we've got that sequencing capability. And in our case, I've got the rules set up to sequence by material type, so it'll do aluminum, then stainless steel, and then back and forth. So it'll, again, that could be color, could be material type, could be whatever you want, right? And that can also be used to reduce setup. If I've got a bunch more setup to do aluminum welding, I'll want to run all those together before I switch over to stainless steel. Okay. Now, this guy above it, while I'm here, this powder coat line, you'll notice I've got 2 production orders scheduled on that same machine at the same time. And that's because we've flagged this specific machine as not being capacity constrained, which means it's unlimited capacity. I can throw as much as I want on this particular machine. And that provides a couple of different capabilities. Number one, it's for subcontracting. I don't really care what that subcontractor capacity is. They've said it's going to take 24 hours to return this thing to me, so I schedule a 24-hour block and I just throw as much as I can at it, and they'll deal with it, right? So I don't need to worry about it. But it does show that it's scheduled on there. The other use for this is to identify what to do about bottlenecks, right? So MX will actually track the data that'll tell you what machine centers and work centers are bottlenecks. If you've got high utilization, high queue time, it'll calculate that all automatically. You've got a bottleneck situation, and that that's slowing down your production. So what do you do about that? Today, if you had to deal with that, you'd go out there with a clipboard and a stopwatch and stand there and watch the guys for an hour and figure out what to do, or not an hour, probably a day, and figure out what to do. With MX, you just say, hey, we're not going to capacity constrain that machine. Let's see what happens. And it's going to go and tell you what capacity you would actually need to get an optimal schedule and what resources and everything else you need to actually run that. And then you can start making some decisions. Do you add another shift? Do you, add another machine? Do you subcontract more? What do you do? But it gives you those tools to help you make those types of decisions, right? So a lot more intelligent. You're not flying blind. You know exactly what's going on with your environment ahead of time, right? Because again, we're looking forward in time. This could be a month ahead, and we can tell you, hey, in a month, you're going to have a bottleneck on this machine. What are you going to do about it? And if you've got the rule set up, it may have already decided based on that bottleneck, it's going to subcontract the stuff for you, right? Automatically. Okay, so that's a little bit on the on how the schedule is produced or what the results of the schedule are. And from within here, I can click on any of these things. I can look at the details. I can drill down. I can do all that kind of stuff. I can move these operations to different machines, those sorts of things as well. All right, now that's usually what people will do, right? They'll run the schedule instead of having it pop up this result list. Well, actually, I would still do the result list because it gives you these statistics, but they'll run the schedule. They'll give it a once over from the statistics. They'll give it a once over on the chart, and then they'll go hit commit, and that'll save that schedule into the production orders in Business Central, and then everything works the way it would normally work, right? Exactly the same. Well, with the exception, Business Central, they tie the schedule to the due date on the production order, which is weird. We don't do that. We'll tell you if something is actually late or early based on the schedule, which Business Central doesn't really do. But other than that, everything works exactly the same way. You execute your production the same way, all of those sorts of things. You're just running on a far better schedule than what Business Central could ever produce on its own. All right, now to get to that point where I just hit that button and 10 seconds later, bang, I'm done. I'm done my scheduling for the day. I'll show you what you need to do to set up. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go into the setup area here. And if you install this from AppSource, you install it and you have to run the assisted setup wizard. It'll go through and get the basics done. That's all I've done here. I've run the assisted setup and it sets all of the stuff up for me. So a few of the things I wanted to mention here, the schedule behavior, again, if you want to automate this so it just runs every night or twice a day or whatever it is, you can set that up in a job queue. And then when it's done, you've got a bunch of options for how you want those results displayed or handled, right? So like I said, it could just pop up and show the chart or show the result list like what I've got set, all of these different options here. The other thing I'll mention is up here, this default order priority. Let me just move my mouse off that. So this is something that Business Central doesn't have, but a lot of people need, right? They've got a customer that's got a high priority order. How do you slot that in the schedule and see what the ramifications are? Well, each production order has an order priority field on it, but it gets the default value from this field here. And this is kind of nice because what you can do is if you're running a campaign or if you've got specific customers that always get priority or things like that, you can have an extension in Business Central that assigns that priority to those specific production orders that are created by customer or campaign or part number or whatever you want to do. Or I can manually go in there, customer phones up and yells at me because they need their stuff. I go to their production order, change the priority, and it'll reschedule and make sure their stuff gets done first. Okay, so anyway, there's a bunch of stuff, and there's a whole bunch of other options, but normally you run assisted setup, sets all the stuff, and that's all you really need to do. Now, there's a couple other things that you may want to do though, and one of them is the alternate groups. And alternate groups is where we get to decide how it selects a work center or machine center to run production on. And what I'm going to do is I'll just show you this long press break alternate group here. And what this does is it shows me that, when I schedule something on the 90-ton press break, I have an option. I have two options if I can't actually use that machine. If that machine is busy, I've got two options. One of them is to use this 120-ton, and that's what you saw on the chart, where it chose the 120-ton because the 90-ton was busy. But I do incur some penalties when I choose that 120-ton. And it'll take that into account. It'll say, yeah, it's a lot longer to set up or to run, but you know what? It still makes more sense than sitting there waiting for a machine to open up for you. Right? And there's a bunch of things you can set, so order quantity and preference. So here's the subcontracting. Instead of this 120-ton, it could have chosen subcontracting, but there's a big penalty. There's a 48-hour penalty on that if I subcontract. And I could also say I'm only allowed to subcontract if I've got 1,000 pieces or more, things like that. And there's a big hit on the timing and everything else. But using this, it can make those intelligent decisions as to which machines to actually run. So this might be another section you want to set up, is these alternate groups to control how things are scheduled. The last thing I'll mention on the setup, which you may want to change, is what we call the scheduling rules. And the rules are really the sequencing rules. This is how it's actually going to go out and determine how to schedule the orders. And I've just got one defined, and this is sort of the default. And if we open this guy up, it'll give us sort of the, I guess, rules. It's kind of redundant, but it gives us the parameters that the rule uses for the schedule. And so what this is saying is the first thing it looks at when it does the scheduling is priority. So it's going to go out and whatever that priority that I mentioned on the production order is, it's going to use that and it's going to schedule the highest priority orders first based on that rule logic. And then after priority, it's going to look at due date. So if everything comes in with a priority of 5, they're all equal. So it's going to schedule by due date. It's going to try and get the earliest orders out first. And then it's going to use this user 2. And user 2, in my case, happens to be the material type. It's the aluminum versus stainless steel. So I've chosen that, and so it's going to first look at the due date, and then it's going to, on the same due date, it's going to then sequence by the material type. And you've got a whole bunch of different options here. There's a whole bunch of different user things, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff you can use within these rules. So some of them get a little bit fancy, like, you know, average time for each operation. So you want to schedule your fastest operations first, and then your longer operations next. All sorts of different things that you can actually use to generate these schedules, right? Now, the other thing I'll mention on this rule logic here, you've got a few different options. Ascending is the most common, just means, you know, earliest first or smallest first. But we've got things like the sawtooth waves. And this is good for sequencing, right? If I wanted to sequence my colors, like if user 2 was actually my color, that would start, you know, with light, work its way up to dark, and then drop back down to light. And if you wanted to get fancy, when it drops from dark to light, we could actually even schedule some maintenance in there. You've got a cleaning operation or additional setup time you need to do to flush the lines and everything to go from dark to light. And then the triangle, you know, for foods or for heat treating, things like that. An oven is a good example. You know, you start at a specific low temperature, and then you heat the oven up and you do different parts at the higher and higher temperatures, and then you ramp down to the lower temperature, right? So, because you can't just, you know, ramp up and then start at a low temperature again. You got to sit there and wait for the oven to cool. So these triangles are good for that type of environment. So anyway, there's a whole bunch of things you can set there, but the defaults are probably good enough, right? So if you install this in your environment with your data, chances are it's going to run and generate a usable schedule out of the box immediately for you. Now, depending on how you've set things up, if you've got interesting, in air quotes, work center, machine center set up, or operations, things like that, you might need some help just to have a look at that data. But generally speaking, if I take the Microsoft demo data and set it up and run it, I will get valid schedules out of the box without any additional work. Now, obviously, there's a lot more we can do with this. So let's actually go ahead and look at some of the routings and things like that in here. So I'm going to go into the routings, and we'll look at this long bracket here. So this is what it takes to produce this long bracket. And this is a standard Business Central routing, right? Everything in here is exactly the same as standard Business Central up to this field right here, this alternate group. So you still set up your routings exactly the same way with setup time, runtime, all that kind of stuff. And then over here, you get to start adding some additional capabilities that MX is going to look at to generate that schedule. And this is that alternate group, right? So that's that long press break. So let me scroll back over. So remember, this is the one I scheduled on that 90-ton, 10-foot press break. But I say, if that thing is busy, here's what you're allowed to look at instead. And that was the subcontracting or the 120-ton. Okay. This breaks allowed is, I'm not going to go through all these in detail, but just a few of them. This breaks allowed is a nice one because that's another big issue with standard Business Central. You know, I start an operation at 4:30 in the afternoon and 5 o'clock my shift is over. A lot of those operations I can't just stop and pick up where I started the next day. Maybe it's extrusion and I can't just turn that off and come back tomorrow, or it's an oven, I can't just stop it and, you know, come and finish the bread the next day or do the heat treating or whatever. So what this allows us to do is prevent breaks from occurring within an operation. So if I start it, I have to be able to finish it in order for that thing to schedule on the same shift or without any breaks at any rate over a period of time. This max early days is also kind of handy because, you know, if I've got no load on a specific cell or machine, you know, and I've got a product I need to ship in a month, well, I could complete that product tomorrow. You may not want to do that. The customer might want to actually have that shipped, you know, in a month, not as soon as you can build it. So you could set this up to say, you know what, I'm not allowed to complete that production within, unless it's within a few days of the actual due date. So what that allows you to do is, for things that expire, I don't want to produce something 3 weeks early and by the time I ship it, it's almost expired. I want to ship it right after I produce it. So that allows us to do those sorts of things. So there's a whole bunch of options here you can set. The other thing I'll mention on here, the lot splitting is another good one where, again, you can go in and split up a production order into multiple lots. So you still only have one production order in the system. So all your MRP and your purchasing, everything works the same way you'd expect. But from a manufacturing perspective, instead of having one big production order for 20,000 parts, I could have 20 production orders for 1,000 parts, and it's not production orders, 20 lots for 1,000 parts each. So in Business Central, we still have that one production order, but on the schedule, we've broken it up into 20 individual scheduling blocks that could be scheduled on different machines, they could be scheduled on different days, whatever you've got set up. Okay, so anyway, there's a whole bunch of additional things you can set up here. And when you get into the more advanced stuff, our specialists will come in and help you with some of these things. But generally speaking, it's very easy to set up and use. Again, you could install it from MxAPS today, run the assisted setup wizard, maybe add some machine alternates and some setup rules and things like that. But generally install it from MxAPS, run setup wizard, hit generate schedule, and likely the production orders you have within your environment today would get scheduled magically, and it'll be far better than what you've been doing manually or what Business Central has produced out of the box. Okay, so I think that's really all I wanted to show for software until we get into the questions. So let's go back through this and talk a little bit about what else this gets you. So I'm not going to go through this too much. I think if you, went through that last section, you understand what the value will be in this, but these are actual real customer, return on investment metrics that we've seen at actual customer environments. And what we see a lot of is WIP reduction, better schedule attainment, which is better customer service, whole bunch of stuff. We had one customer that reduced inventory by, I don't know, some crazy amount, like 70%, because they did just-in-time scheduling, and they actually scheduled their receiving base to coincide with when their production was supposed to start. So they no longer stocked any of their raw materials and subcomponents. Those things arrived a few hours before they needed them. So there's lots of things you can do if you want to get fancy, but generally speaking, it's going to save you a ton of time and a whole bunch of ancillary benefits with that as well. All right, now the way it's sold is based on the number of production orders that you have in the system. So it starts at 75 production orders is sort of the lower tier up to 1,000, 3,000 unlimited, those types of things. And it's fairly low cost, right? So if you have a small number of production orders, it's going to cost you less than a couple $100 a month to basically do what I just showed you there. And that that'll save you that much money in the first day, right? The cost of a production planner sitting there trying to figure this stuff out manually for $200, you just solved that, and that was on the first day, right? And then again, that's a small number of production orders. The pricing goes up from there. There is a price change coming in the new year, so this is not actually that accurate. Some of the pricing will increase, but a lot of the pricing will also decrease. So depending on how many production orders you have, you might see a decrease in price, or you might see a slight increase in the pricing. All right, so that's kind of how it's done. So we'll pause here on the screen for the contact information. Again, you can contact us. You can go and check out Saber's YouTube channel, our YouTube channel. Again, contact Donna or Rob, anybody at Saber, if you have any questions about this.
Thank you for watching our videos. Please follow our channel by clicking here to stay up to date with the latest content, or click here for more great videos. Don't forget to visit our website at saberlimited.com. We look forward to seeing you next time.